We are preparing for Easter. Last week we handed out, someone else handed out, wasn't me, some pages with scriptures referring to Easter. Did anyone not get that who'd like one today or like another one? Yes, there's some who weren't. And if anyone else needs another one, there are some available here. Welcome. And we're not going to be directly referencing this, but this is more for your personal study throughout the week. We're going to actually be referencing a number of them today. We're not just going to just refer to the paper. Let me grab this. So as Pastor referenced, we are doing something a little bit different. To help us prepare for Easter, there are a lot of things that are going on to help people prepare for Easter. Some restaurants are serving fish more for all of our Catholic friends who are just doing fish on Fridays. But there are there's a lot of activities going on. There's all sorts of plays, there's productions, there are Lenten celebrations. Some people are giving up certain things to prepare their hearts for Easter. So one of the things that we are doing here is focusing on the story of Easter, but from a different lens. And that lens is trying to look at making the Easter story, the relevance of it, clearer to contemporary folks, including us. Maybe back to the next slide there. Yeah, so how can we make the Easter story more relevant, clear, or to make that, it's a relevant story, to make it, that relevance clear. And so one of the things we did a number of years ago, I won't say how many years because it'll age some of us.
Thank you.
Okay. Was we tried to translate the Easter story into contemporary terms. And the question was this: what if Jesus had come today instead of 2,000 years ago, and he was in this environment, and he was dealing with folks like us instead of folks in Galilee and Palestine? How would the world react today, and how would the story end today if he'd come today? And so we did a play called TheWake, and what we're doing is we're looking at reviewing that play, which is a contemporary retelling of the Easter story, and to try to look at to peel back the layers of why it's relevant to us today. So we've broken this the production into 4 episodes. Last week we did episode 1. It's available because we're living today and not 2,000 years ago. It's available on the intranet, or internet, I guess. And so Mike's posted the last week's episode. We're going to look at another segment today, but just so we can get back up to speed. And some of you weren't here last week, so I want to kind of cover some ground. So last week on TheWake, you ever watch a series and they start off with last week on Lost? So Mike, let's one more. Okay, there you go. That's good. So we introduced several people in our video last week, and the first people that we met were Reverend Edwards and Penny. And does anyone remember anything about those characters?
Penny was the daughter.
Penny was the daughter, yep. And Reverend Edwards was a reverend. That's kind of like the point there. And he had been asked to do the funeral service for a guy who was infamous. In fact, none of the other religious leaders would touch it. In fact, there have even been threats leveraged against him that you stay away from this guy. He did a lot of stuff. People knew about him, but the establishment, they hated him. And they actually had just executed him. And we know, as we talk about this, that we're talking about Jesus. So they had just killed Jesus, and they weren't done. they wanted to make sure that his memory was erased. And so they didn't want anything to do to help him, to remember him, or to help people latch onto what he taught. So, but Reverend Edwards is a little, I don't want to say stupid, but not, he's not stupid. He agreed to do it. He was kind of open to Jesus' teaching. Everyone else had kind of rejected him. He had more of an open mind to what he taught. And so he wanted to make sure, I think one of his lines was, everyone deserves to have a funeral. And so he'd agreed to do the funeral for this character, Jesus, that all the religious leaders hated. Most of them did, at least. All right, so we got introduced to these people. And so he's decided, his daughter doesn't want him to do it. He's decided, I'm going to do the funeral. His daughter is like, oh, it's going to be dangerous. And he wants her to leave town because it's so dangerous. And she says, no, I'm going to stay here with you. Okay. Then we got introduced to, we were taken to a Greasy Spoon Diner where some folks were hiding out. Pete, Johnny, Jim, Maggie, and Sam was there too. And we might recognize Sam, who is with us today. Pete, Johnny, Jim. Who were these Bible characters? Pete, Peter, Johnny, John, Jim, James, and Maggie was who? Mary Magdalene. Okay. They were hiding out. They're in tumult. They're just like, how could this have happened? We love Jesus. How could something so bad have happened? And they were fearful that they were going to be attacked as well. And for good reason. They might well have been attacked as well and even killed. So they're processing it as much as we would. One of the thoughts behind the production was, what would it be like to be there in real time without knowing the ending? If you watched Jesus die and didn't know how the story ended, what would that have been like? And so here, we were introduced to these guys, and they were kind of wrestling with that. And Sam just happens to be the waitress who's tending to them, and Mary Magdalene is traveling with them. We talked about her and her background last week. All right, there's a third group that we got introduced to. This is a motley crew. The guy on the right is particularly fearsome. And so this is the body in the casket, is the body of Jesus, if he were today. It's guarded by agents, fearsome agents who are packing heat underneath their suits. They have instructions, no one gets near the body. We have the guy in the middle there, and some of you will remember as Pastor Larry, who was playing a really mean guy in this place. It was D.A. Kaiser, the district attorney, and he represented who? Caiaphas, right, yeah. So he was the guy who put Jesus in the box, he said. And he wanted to make sure that nothing happened to him, that no one got too close to that he was secure. In fact, Mike, the next slide, he did something really weird at the end. What did he do? Do you remember the video, what D.A. Kaiser did?
Put a chain on the casket.
He put a chain on the casket. Very strange thing, but he wanted to make sure that nothing happened. I want to, let's read a passage before we watch the video, the next episode. Could someone read for us Matthew 27, 62 through 66? And you're welcome to just to follow along.
The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first. Take guard, Pilate answered. Go make the tomb as secure secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure by putting the seal on the stone and posting it to the ground.
All right. The padlock, the chain represents that seal on the stone. And some background to that. The seal that was placed on Jesus' tomb was really an official Roman statement, which says this is under our protection. And what they would have likely have done is taking a rope on one side of the stone and attached it with this bonding clay type material, put the rope across, attached it on the other end, and then the Roman guard would have placed, embedded in that clay, a symbol of Rome, of the Roman governor. And what it basically did is said, this is under protection of Rome, mess with this at your own peril. And at your own peril meant a painful death. These guys are serious about protection. So to disrupt that, to break that seal, to open up that tomb, would have invited certain death, not just an easy death, but a painful death in that day. We also talked about they made it as secure as possible. So they posted the guard. Very likely it would have been more like, instead of 4 guys, we only had 4 mean-looking guys here at that time. But they would have had like 16 guards there. And the penalty for falling asleep in the night would have been that they would have taken your clothes, started a fire with them, and then burned you alive in the fire. So it's a pretty serious matter. No one wanted to fall asleep. And it was very serious. Their duty was very serious. So they did everything they could to try to make the tomb secure. In our play, our drama, they've taken an extra step of even padlocking the tomb. All right. So that's where we're at with the story so far. We've introduced those characters. Let's view episode 2 and see how the story continues.
Hello, Reverend Edwards. Oh, hello, Penny. I'm doing fine. And how are you doing? How are things upstairs? Why do you do this? Why do you call me from upstairs instead of just coming downstairs to talk to me? Or even yelling downstairs? Try yelling at me. I think you'd like it. It'd be kind of like payback for all the times I yelled at you when you were a kid. Yeah, I'll be leaving for the funeral home in just a minute, but I'll only be gone for a couple hours. Hey, how about if I pick up some ice cream on the way home? Sure, be happy to. The usual. My blue one. Yes, the blue one. What's wrong with it? No, I don't have any bulletproof ties. Well, what exactly would a tie that says, "Don't mess with me," look like? This blue one will be just fine. The blue one will be just fine. The blue one will be just fine. The red power tie will be okay. As long as you bring it from upstairs. As you've been reminding me, I'm old, far too feeble to make another trip up and down the stairs. Yes, Penny. It's been nice talking to you, too. Kids.
Shotgun!
Shotgun. Oh, no. You're not going with me.
Oh, yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
Don't even start that.
Dad, listen. I love you, and I'm not going to let you go there alone. If you won't let me ride in your car, well, then I'll just have to drive myself down there. And what kind of a father would let his daughter drive through the roughest part of town all by herself?
I knew it was a mistake giving you driving lessons.
And besides, they might mess with a feeble old man, but are they going to mess with this? Hi-ya! Ha!
Finally, after 2 decades, those 3 karate lessons are going to pay off.
Fine, Dad.
done?
I'm done. Here's your tie. Now that's a properly intimidating tie. No one's gonna mess with a guy wearing a tie like that. Just the kind of look one needs for officiating the funeral of a despised criminal mastermind. So, up all night working on the message?
I have no idea what to say. I mean, this guy was infamous. There's so many wild stories circulating. For the last couple years, he's been in the news like every day. And the tabloids are always featuring some crazy story about him.
Oh, I know. I like the one where they revealed that he was an alien sent here from far, far away.
That was a pretty good one. I like that one. So I don't know. How do I sort out what's true and what's real from urban legend? And what could I possibly say to eulogize his larger-than-life life? Or to bring any closure to this craziness?
Just do what you always do, Dad. You're so good with funerals. You just need to go and minister to the hurting people. Listen to his family and friends. Let them tell their story. You'll piece it together. You always do.
Did I ever tell you my story about how I went to hear him speak once?
No, I've heard a lot of your stories, but I don't remember that one.
Well, I think it was probably when all the trouble was happening with you and Robert, before you moved back home. Well, ministers and religious bigwigs alike were always trying to get close to him. But not so close that you might be mistaken for a fan. That would be a very bad career. But if they could, they'd try to goad him into a debate and try to catch him in some duplicity or something. He just always seemed too smart for that. But I went to hear him because I just really wanted to hear what he had to say. And even though what he had to say wasn't always very easy to hear, I liked what I heard. Such a change from the usual sterile religious mumbo-jumbo. It was like a breath of fresh air. So afterwards, I went to talk to him. And I asked him, what's the most important thing in life? His answer was so simple, but it made such perfect sense. And I told him that. And then he leans over to me and he says, "You are so close to getting it." Gotta tell you, in that moment, I probably was about this close to just chucking it all and joining he and that group of associates of his. That would have been something, huh? Your old man traipsing around the country with some crazed, most wanted guru. Well, look at the time. I've got to get out of here so I can be there a little bit early. They're not open very long tonight, so I want to be there right when they start off.
I'm ready to go.
Penny, please, just stay here. I'll tell you all about it when I get back home.
Not a chance, Pops.
Well, if you're going to ride shotgun, then I hope that someplace tucked away in that purse of yours, you actually have a shotgun.
Yeah, sure. Right next to the lipstick.
What?
Pete, you're so Where did you get that suit?
Well, my cousin said he had one that I could borrow, but the coat was too small.
And you didn't think the pants were too small?
I got them on, but I just couldn't squeeze into the coat. So I borrowed this coat from his dad, my Uncle Jay, but he's a really big guy.
I don't know if I want to see how the other two managed. Hey, Sam. Hey, you guys are back.
Yeah, we have to wait in a little while.
Oh, that's right. You look exhausted.
hard somehow.
Yeah.
So, can I get you 2 coffee this morning?
Yeah, sure. Just black, please.
And for you, Maggie?
No, I hate coffee, but I do love hot chocolate.
All right, coming right up.
Thanks. You worried?
No,
You look worried.
I'm not worried. Are you?
No. I just hope everything goes smoothly. Thanks, Sam. Hey, why don't you have a seat?
I should get back to work.
Nobody's here but us.
Oh, right.
Come on, have a seat. Keep us company.
Okay.
So, how long have you lived in the area?
I just moved here a couple of weeks ago.
Oh. How do you like it so far?
I don't know. It's okay, I guess.
Where did you live before here?
I've been moving all over since I was about 17.
17. Wow.
Where are your parents?
They live in a small town north of here.
Why did you move out when you were 17? Oh gosh, sorry, I'm crying.
No, it's all right. My parents have always lived there. They were born there, they met there, they got married there. I guess it just wasn't enough for me. I've always felt like I was supposed to do something different. I just want to make a difference. I'm still searching. I'm sorry, none of this makes any sense.
No, it actually makes perfect sense. I know exactly what you mean.
I can't believe I'm telling you this. You guys have more important things on your mind.
Actually, I was trying to put them out of my mind.
Oh, hey guys. Hey.
Can I get you anything?
No thanks, honey.
Oh, hey, Mom, this is Sam. Sam, this is Chimps, and my mom, Sally.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Sam.
Just holler if you need anything.
What is it? Why are you smiling like that?
Yeah, what?
Oh, nothing. It's just your suits. Well, they're suits, so I guess I can't complain too much.
Told you.
Don't worry about it. You both look great.
I'm sorry. Maybe just one suggestion. Johnny, a bow tie?
You can find a regular tie. And besides, Mom says it looks classy.
Oh.
Fine.
That collar looks a little tight. Why didn't you undo the top button?
Anyways, if we're done critiquing each other's clothing, what happens if this really does turn out to be a trap or something? What if we all get separated?
Yeah, we should probably have a place to meet. Well, yeah. Hey, there's a park down the street. Should just meet there.
A park? I didn't see a park.
Oh, Mom, just stay close by us.
You think they would actually use the wake as an opportunity to arrest you?
It is a possibility.
Why?
Well,
What did your friend do that was so bad? What did you guys do?
Our friend was executed.
Why?
Well, that depends on who you ask.
What do you mean?
Well, what it boils down to is our friend was helping a lot of people like us. And, well, the powers that be, well, they were afraid. Afraid of what he might do with so many appreciative followers. Afraid of what he might become.
So the district attorney prosecuted him on trumped-up charges. They had a quick circus of a trial, and then they quickly sent out execution orders. Well, the next thing we knew, he was dead.
I'm so sorry.
Well, we should probably head on over there.
Yeah.
You guys go on ahead. I'm gonna swing by his mom's place and make sure she's okay.
Sounds good. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks for everything, Sam. Hey, if you weren't scheduled to work, I'd say drop by TheWake. It's right across the street. Wish we would have had more time to tell you about our friend. I know we made it sound all mysterious and scary, but he was such a good person. You know what you said about searching for something? Well, I was the exact same way until I met him.
When I see you guys again.
Well, the funeral's tomorrow, and the boys need their coffee fix, so yeah, I'm sure we'll be around.
Bye. Good luck.
All right, episode 2 takes us into the characters a little bit further. Next week, episode 3, we'll actually go to the viewing. We talked before how the traditions, our traditions for death and for funerals and all that are quite different than what they would have been back then. So we envision maybe a viewing and then a scheduled funeral service. We'll see how that turns out. All right. So, back to Reverend Edwards and Penny. He's wrestling with what can he say about this guy, Jesus. And he said the stories around him, there are all these wild stories around about him. I was talking with someone last week, and we were just speculating, what if Jesus had come today? Can you imagine all the Twitter feeds about him, all the Facebook posts, all the things that? So this was written, I'll say it, 10 years ago. And so we're talking about tabloids, but now it's all electronic, right? So if Jesus were traveling about doing what he did back then, and you were to pick up your news feed on your phone, or you were to pick up a tabloid, what are some of the headlines that we would see about Jesus? Some of the stories about him.
Man heals hundreds.
Man heals hundreds. Yep. All caps. Lots of exclamation points. What other headlines would be out there?
Man causes death of herd of thousands of pigs.
Yes. And then you have interviews with pig industry folks talking about how much it's hurt them, and there'll be charts about the fall in prices and stuff. Yeah. What other kinds of headlines would this infamous guy be producing?
Jesus causes riots and arrests.
Yeah. And so then you would have this battle of spin going on, right? That happens. And so then you try to have the religious organization trying to spin it like Jesus is causing all these bad problems. And maybe it starts off with all these positive words, things going on. But then there's a spin like, we had to put him to death. And there'd be maybe some pushback from others just saying that's not really what happened. There'd be these other accounts. Other miracles that may have been headlined.
Lazarus be raised.
Jesus raises man from the dead. Story at 7. Yeah.
Jesus walks on water.
Jesus, can't you see walking up in a grocery store and seeing that headline, Jesus walks on water, and there'll be some fake show picture about or something, some distant, you can't really tell who it is. Yeah, Jesus walks on water. All these wild stories. Jesus heals blind man. Jesus raises widow's son from the dead. Jesus feeds thousands. Wow, it's just incredible. All of these stories. Now, they didn't. Go ahead.
Jesus drives merchants out of church lobby.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Vatican.
Very good. Yeah, they had a picture of Jesus with a whip, with these guys, cardinals and stuff, running up. Now, so they didn't have the advantages, if that's what really is, of all this new technology. But those stories were circulated. So they had information always spreads. And so it'd be word of mouth, people go talking along and walking aside of, did you hear about what happened? Did you hear about all these thousands of people who Jesus fed? And then people would be like flocking to him and getting close so they could hear it for themselves and trying to gather the story. So when we think about Easter, and we prepare our hearts for it, I think it helps us to put us back in that day of thinking about all that he did as he was on earth, to reflect on all the miracles that he did, and how that would impact us, how it might have impacted them as well. So Jesus was an infamous character. I want to spend a little time in Mark's Gospel, chapter 12. Read a couple passages from there. So we might want to turn to there. Let's start off with reading, someone would be so kind as to read Mark 12, 1 through 12.
Reading from the NIV. He then began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a pit for the winepress, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and went away on the journey. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. But they seized him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Then he sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head and treated him shamefully. He sent still another, and that one they killed. He sent many others. Some of them they beat, others they killed. He had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, saying, "They will respect my son." But the tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they took him and killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill those tenants, and give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read this scripture? The stone the builders rejected has become the capstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Then they looked for a way to arrest him, because they knew he had spoken the parable against them. But they were afraid of the crowd, so they left him and went away.
All right. Infamous Jesus. Doing all these miraculous things among the people, proving that the hand of God is on him, but also teaching. And here, under observation by all the admiring throng, but also the religious establishment, he teaches this parable. How would you summarize the parable that he taught? What's the main points to it? It's about a landowner who sets up a vineyard, plants it, takes care of it.
Tenants had no respect for the landlord, what his rights were.
That's right. Tenants had no respect for him. He sends delegates, representatives to them. What do they do to him? Beat him. So, right away, the religious leaders begin sensing there's a story. There's something here going. There's something in this story, as there often was. What do you think, so far in our story, is it's about? Who are these representatives that the owner sent to the people?
It's about the land of Israel. The vineyard is what could have been in Israel. The religious leaders, the people of the time, killing prophets.
Yep, the prophets. So the owner, God, had sent numerous prophets to them, and they started off by they end up killing them. And finally, in the end, he decides, I'm going to take one more step to reach out to these folks. And who does he send in this case? His son. And what's the outcome?
They killed
They
him.
killed him. As I've been reading through the scriptures, thinking about Easter, one of the things I'm just taken back is just how often Jesus told them how the story ended, and how it was going to play out. Here, a parable that very clearly lays out the days ahead, and not only lays out history of the thousands of years, but lays out what's going to happen over There are numerous times where Jesus told them, in 3 days, I'm going to be killed, in 3 days I'm going to rise again. Why do you think they just couldn't get that? Why didn't they embrace that story and just accept that?
Because it seemed impossible that anyone would be able to kill Jesus. People had tried and tried and tried, and he just slipped away and walked away. And he had the power and authority of God, so how in the world would anybody kill him?
And that's a good perspective. This guy's obviously, from the people's perspective, this guy's obviously from God, so nothing bad could happen to God's ambassadors, right? Kind of forgetting about the prophets who had gone before him. Yeah.
Well, if they chose to believe a crazy story that he would die and rise again in 3 days, then they have to believe everything else. And they didn't want to because they were kind of the bad guys in that story.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't want to accept his teachings. Certainly weren't going to accept this idea that he could die and come back to life again. Yeah.
He was supposed to be the Savior. And they thought he would save them from the Romans and be a new king. And that wasn't his plan.
All these preconceived ideas about what God should do and how God would move. And this Jesus seemed to be running across upstream even sometimes, just not fitting into what their expectations were. So, Jesus talked. He revealed God's plan really very clearly. It wasn't accepted, and it earned the hatred of the religious establishment. Let's jump to, and I encourage us to read the whole chapter. There's a lot of his good teachings there. To verse 28, and let's see, through 34. Someone read that. Ed, thank you.
The greatest commandment. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked them, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Stop there?
Yeah, keep going.
Well said, teacher. The man replied, you are right in saying that God is one and there is no other one but him. To love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all burnt offering and sacrifice. When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And from then on, no one dared ask him any more questions.
There's a story about an encounter with one of the religious leaders. And this is the religious leader that Reverend Edwards is based on. When he talks to his daughter about a story about going to visit Jesus, it's this story. It's about him going with an open mind to hear the teacher and to see all the people attacking him and trying to trick him. And yet he just simply wants the truth. He's open to the truth. And he asks Jesus what's most important. And Jesus gives the best answer there could be for that, the true answer. What's most important? Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. There's no more greater laws than these, he says. And instead of criticizing him, he says, good answer. Good answer, teacher. And Jesus says, you are so close, you are not far from the kingdom. Just a little further, you're close. And that's who Reverend Edwards is that character. In that time, when we think about the story of Easter and Jesus and his ministry and all that's going on, I wonder how many people were like that, who were so close, who heard some of the things that he had done, who saw some of the headlines, maybe heard him teach and were moved by it. And they weren't quite there. They were so close to accepting him, so close to being a disciple, so close to the kingdom. But so close isn't enough, is it? And as we see as our story progresses, we're going to speculate on what happens with Reverend Edwards, but for a lot of folks, they were so close. And maybe that we have friends who are so close to the kingdom. And with a little further nudging, with the word, with encouragement, with prayer, they too might take that step and become his disciples as well. All right, so a lot happening with the religious establishment, preparing for the funeral. Then we go back to the greasy spoon dining. Let me just kind of basis. Let me pull up the scripture for you here. Let's see. Let me find it real quick. If I have the right one down. Okay. How would you characterize how the disciples are doing in this story?
Confused.
Okay.
Confused. Yeah, they're okay. In this one, they're kind of carrying on. Where are they at? What seems to be their major concern?
Getting arrested.
Getting arrested. Yeah. I think at Easter it's good to remember starting points and character arcs, how characters can change over time. When I think about the disciples, I guess I usually go to where they ended up. I go to Acts. And I think about, the work of the church and all that happened, the spread of the gospel. But it's good to remember that that's not where they started. John 20:19. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came. This is after the resurrection. They were in a room with the door locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. And that's kind of how we're portraying them here. Are you afraid? Are you worried? No. Well, yeah, I am. Pete says, yeah, I am worried. What if they choose to do something with this? It was a very real fear. There was a real danger that they could be next. And right now, at this time between Jesus' death and resurrection, they're locked into that fearful period where they're overshadowed by it. They don't see the victory yet. They don't see where it's headed. They don't even remember what Jesus told them about how the story ends. And they're locked in this fear. We get a sense of that from them here, where they're timid. There are some people who've said about history, well, Jesus wasn't resurrected. His body was stolen by his disciples. I don't see these guys doing that. I don't see these guys taking on a group of 16 well-armed Roman soldiers with the fear of a painful death. If you even survived that attempt to do it, if somehow you could overpower them, you're still going to face a very painful death from Rome. I don't see the guys in that coffee shop doing that. Right now they're in fear. Unfortunately, we know the story doesn't end there. But that was their experience in this time between his death and resurrection. We're introduced to another character that wasn't there last week. Who's that new character? Sally, right. Who is the mother of who? Okay. Jim and Johnny, yes. Who, let's see. We'll remember this one. We'll look at another passage. James and Johnny were known, had some ways that they were known. What were some of the ways that they were referenced?
Sons of thunder.
Sons of thunder. Yep. They were also referenced to the sons of Zebedee. Why were they called the sons of Zebedee? Because they were the sons of Zebedee. They were his sons. And in Matthew in chapter 4, when we see the calling of the disciples take place. They're with their dad Zebedee, and they're fishermen. Now we said in today's age, they might not be fishermen. If they were in Detroit, they might be auto workers, perhaps. They work at the GM plant or the Ford plant or something. They're just regular guys. In this case, they were working with their father Zebedee in his fishing business. They're helping him to fish. And so they leave their father and they join Jesus. But there's this ongoing family connection. Could someone read Matthew 20, verses 17 through 20?
Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. On the way, he took the 12 aside and said to them, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will be condemned to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day he will be raised to life." Did you say through 20?
Through 20.
Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down and asked a favor of him. That's 20.
And maybe the next one.
Okay. What is it you want? He asked. She said, Grant one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right hand and the other one at your left in your kingdom. Will you read Jesus' part there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink? We can't, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father.
All right. They're traveling. They're headed to Jerusalem. Once again, Jesus lays it very clearly open. Here's what's going to happen, guys. They just can't accept it. And in that moment where he says the Son of Man is going to be killed and he's going to rise from the dead, someone steps forward and asks for a favor. Who steps forward?
Their mother.
Their mother. All right. James and John's mom, in this case Sally, we call her, steps forward. And the scriptures reference, in particular, if you read the passage about the resurrection, about the death, women are a critical part of that story. In fact, it talks about the number of women who are there to be witnesses of the crucifixion, women who had traveled with him from Galilee to support him in his ministry. And so we see that traveling among them, among these women of Galilee, was James and John's mom. And like many moms, she's concerned about her sons, and she sees the role that they have, and I don't think she quite gets it about what's going on at this point, and she asks for them to sit in his kingdom on his right and left hand side. And we've pulled her in our story. There seems to be this family thing going on, right? So we think about 12 disciples, one who doesn't remain a disciple. And we have these stories, but there's all these family lines that are being connected and continued. Zebedee, we don't know what happened to him. Maybe he's still off fishing in Galilee, keeping the family business going. The boys run off and join Jesus. His mom, their mom, follows after at some point and becomes a disciple and is traveling with them and is going to Jerusalem with them as part of this crowd and gets pulled into this great, God's great divine story. So it's amazing, isn't it, how family connections work and how they can pull others along. And I don't know how much in your story, how much family plays into it, but in my story, the influence of family is thick. My parents and grandparents and a preacher and all these things, and it's the influence of family is so strong. And I think when we think about Easter, we think about celebrating this great story, but it's also a good time to remember about the influence that we have with family and a chance to reach out to that, not make it only about maybe a great meal, but also a chance for sharing faith and drawing others who might be this close to the kingdom. All right, well, that's all the time that we have. So next week, episode 3, which will take us to the viewing that the DA allowed a very, in our story, allowed a very brief viewing, highly protected, watched over viewing of the casket. All right, we'll see you next week. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for, it's just mind-blowing, the story of your son and what you did and how you prophesied about that and how you set things up for it and all the things that were in motion and all the people who were involved and all the many dynamics. And we pray that as we prepare our hearts for Easter, that we will just immersed in that story and immersed in your kingdom, that it will not be said of us that we were so close, but that we're fully engaged in your kingdom.